Yesterday, the administration released its budget request for the Department of Defense that amounts to a $603 billion top line. Since we just received the request, we are still in the early stages of reviewing the specifics of the budget request, which makes this hearing so timely. As I've stated at previous hearings, I support the President's commitment to rebuilding the military. However, I am concerned that the current budget request does not go far enough. I support Chairman Thornberry's statement and, quote, "The administration's budget proposal for defense is not enough to do what the President said he wants to do. In order to begin to repair the damage that has been done to readiness and to build the capacity needed for today's dangerous world, we believe that $640 billion is required for fiscal year 2018." End of quote. A top-line budget of $603 billion for defense in fiscal year 2018 really only represents 3% growth above President Obama's projected budget request for fiscal year 2018 from last year. To be fair enough, it does appear that the Army's modernization request, procurement, RTD&E, and the Marine Corps ground equipment procurement request do provide for some improvement over fiscal year 2017 projected levels. The problem is that due to multiple years of underfunding and reduced budgets, these relative modest increases aren't enough to actually reverse the damage that has been done. For example, the request provides the funding necessary to modernize about half of one armed brigade combat team, meaning that the Army is on a path to fully modernize all of their armored brigade teams by 2035, which is a problem. Finally, I continue to have concerns that we are losing our comparative advantage in ground combat overmatch against near-peer and peer competitors. Legacy combat vehicle platforms, in some cases, are nearing the 40-year mark in terms of service, and I'm concerned that these vehicles are reaching limitations in terms of capability. So, I'm particularly interested in understanding how this budget request begins to address next-generation combat vehicle systems. And now I'd like to recognize my good friend, Nikki Songas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. I look forward to discussing the budget for both the Army and Marine Corps with our witnesses here today, and I thank you for being here. But first, I'd like to address concerns I have with the approach taken by the broader federal budget released just yesterday. The fiscal year 18 President's budget prioritizes defense spending at the expense of other national priorities like education, infrastructure, and economic development. Of particular relevance to our discussion here today, the budget also makes deep cuts to the State Department and USAID, to international security assistance programs that provide defense equipment and training to our partners abroad, and to the Treasury's office responsible for combating terrorist financing, just to name a few. And these cuts are even more pronounced over a 10-year period. Increasing defense spending at the expense of these other critical programs will not only make us less safe, but will undermine important investments key to our national competitiveness and our long-term security. With that in mind, today's hearing is the first chance the subcommittee has to review the Army and Marine Corps fiscal year 2018 budget requests. The delay in completing the budget does put pressure on us to get as much information today as possible, given the short time available before consideration of the 2018 NDAA next month. And there are a few points I'd like to make. First, the 2018 budget request for Army and Marine Corps modernization accounts do appear to show modest growth in comparison to the final 2017 figures for both services. Welcome news given the service's modernization needs, but I hope to hear today how you both plan on using the additional funding to both expand current programs and set the stage for the future by starting some new ones. Research, development, test, and evaluation accounts seem to have also grown at a modest level. I have been worried for some time by the rapid decline in R&D funding, especially for the Army, which over the past few years has reached troublesome lows. I hope to hear more today about both new development programs and expanded research in the science and technology, or S&T, accounts. The second broad issue I wanted to touch on is the importance of keeping a focus on improving personal protective equipment like body armor, helmets, and related materials. Both services continue to make substantial investments in field new equipment, which is encouraging. I think this is both the smart thing to do, but also the right thing to do, given the risks the members of our military take every day. The cost of these programs, in comparison to the billions needed for tanks or helicopters, is relatively small, but should be protected and expanded. A final point I wanted to make was about the importance of competition. A series of laws, executive orders, and subsequent regulations make full and open competition the standard method for acquisition of equipment by the military services. That was done in the taxpayer's interest to ensure fairness, reduce costs, increase transparency, and foster a healthy defense industrial base. However, we all know that the competition process usually does take more time than doing a sole source award. For me, that trade-off, a more time-consuming process, is worth it, except in cases of true emergency combat needs or when optimal products already exist in the commercial sector, situations which have prompted the Congressional Defense Committees to craft needed workarounds. So as both services make use of the exceptions to competition that the law allows, I would caution that it be done thoughtfully, carefully, and only in the case of true urgency. The overarching goal should be to both achieve the benefits of competition and to ensure that the flexibility currently enjoyed by the military services is preserved. With that in mind, I look forward to today's testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you. I understand that General Murray will provide the remarks on behalf of the Army, and General Thomas will provide remarks on behalf of the Marine Corps. Before we begin, they have projected votes between 4:05 and 4:35. If that's, and then we're going to have like an hour-long votes, and after that's going to be difficult to get members back. If we give each of you 5 minutes, if you can shave off a minute or two there, we're going to go to 3-minute round questions, and I'm going to abbreviate mine, and I think we'll get through everybody if we get to a reasonable time for the vote. So with that, gentlemen, please begin. General Murray.
And I'll read fast, Mr. Chairman, so thank you. Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Zongas, distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, on behalf of our Acting Secretary, the Honorable Robert Spear, and our Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, we look forward to discussing with you the fiscal year 2018 President's budget request for Army modernization. The fiscal year 2018 modernization budget request of $27.3 billion represents a modest increase in modernization. The additional funding sustains but does not significantly advance our modernization efforts. Given today's fiscal environment, our modernization strategy remains to focus on our limited modernization budget on the equipment that will have the greatest impact against near-peer threats and can be in the hands of our soldiers in the near future. For the past 10 years, we have focused on the immediate, providing the equipment necessary for our soldiers to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, along with incremental upgrades to our existing combat platforms. That strategy, driven primarily by constrained modernization resources, forced us to defer the development of new combat capabilities. We have now reached a point in time where we can no longer afford to do one or the other, improve existing systems or develop new ones. We must begin to do both. We face critical capability and capacity gaps in areas like air and missile defense, long-range precision fires, munitions, the mobility, protection, and lethality of our brigade combat teams, and active protection, to name just a few. We must begin to fill these gaps if we are to credibly deter and, if necessary, defeat a near-peer adversary. These are challenging times. In the end, the security challenges of tomorrow will be met with equipment we develop, modernize, and procure today. Because adversaries will continue to invest in technology to counter or evade U.S. strengths and exploit vulnerabilities, resource insecurity and insufficient force modernization will place the Army's ability to overmatch its opponents at risk. We owe our future soldiers the equipment they will need to fight and win on a very complex battlefield. We urge Congress to provide fiscal stability, funding that is sufficient, consistent, long-term, balanced, and predictable so we can maintain our current warfighting readiness while simultaneously building a more modern and capable force for the future. I would like to thank you and the entire committee for your resolute support of the men and women of the United States Army, Army civilians, and our families, and I thank you and I look forward to your questions.
General Thomas.
Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Songus, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm honored to represent your Marines and testify on our fiscal year 2018 Ground Force Modernization Program. Your Marines continue to be in high demand from all our combatant commanders around the world. There are 4 deployed, engaged on land and sea, and ready for crisis response. As a result, we must constantly balance between capability and capacity, between current operations and future operations, between steady state and surge readiness, as well as between low-end and high-end operations and training. Our role as America's Naval Expeditionary Force and readiness informs how we man, train, and equip our force. It also drives how we prioritize and allocate the resources we're provided by Congress. While today's force is capable and our forward deployed forces are ready to fight, we've been fiscally stretched to maintain readiness across the breadth of the force. Our fiscal year 2018 budget request builds on the additional funding received in the fiscal year 2017 omnibus appropriation and begins the deliberate effort to fix readiness for today and tomorrow. Modernization is central to addressing near-term readiness and foundational to building the Marine Corps of the 21st century. It includes the replacement of legacy systems with new ones, such as the amphibious combat vehicle, joint light tactical vehicle, the ground-air task-oriented radar, the Common Aviation Command and Control System, and the CH-53K King Stallion. 5 key modernization efforts supporting how we're going to operate, fight in the future. Modernization also includes changes to the structure of our tables of equipment that we continue to incorporate lessons learned from the battlefield into equipment sets that balance affordability with the need for a networked, mobile, and lethal expeditionary force. And it includes the insertion of technology into current capabilities, including such efforts as developing active protection systems, long-range precision fires, and unmanned aircraft system capabilities. The Marine Corps must begin to rebalance and modernize for the future, creating a fifth-generation, multi-domain force with overmatch that can deter and, if necessary, defeat a highly capable near-peer adversary. However, an unstable fiscal environment creates inefficiencies, disrupts our planning, and directly challenges our current and future readiness. With your help, we can begin to overcome these challenges and ensure that the Marine Corps is well postured for the 21st century. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, to get us jump-started, I'm going to ask 3 quick questions that I believe you can both answer yes to, which will get us moving. And so let's see if I'm correct. Obviously, we're concerned about the pace of modernization. If additional funding were provided, could you accelerate Armored Brigade Combat Team modernization? General Murray?
Absolutely.
General Thomas?
We could accelerate key modernization programs, yes.
Great. Second yes question. In your professional opinion, are changes to the current cluster munitions policy required to address current Army requirements and emerging threats? General Murray?
I'm not sure I completely understood the question, Chairman.
We're very concerned about the policy that concerning cluster munitions, which is going to impact your operations, your ability to utilize them. In your professional opinion, does that current policy need to be changed to be able to give you, as you look to requirements and emerging threats? The second part of this, and I'll just go ahead and tell you, is would the loss of the ability to use cluster munitions create an unacceptable capability gap for land component area effects, particularly in major combat operations against near-peer or near-peer equipped opponents?
The answer to the second one is absolutely. It's a critical operational capability that goes away on 1 January 19. The answer to the first one, Mr. Chairman, is I think we have to at least look at it and consider it.
Thomas?
We would advocate a change. The DPICM capability is very important to our force, and to replace that capability is going to take a lot more time and a lot more money.
Great. Thank you. Ranking member, and you should have had the clock on me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased that both services have ongoing efforts to improve the fit and function of female personal protective equipment as the number of women serving in both the Army and Marine Corps continues to increase, and it's something we talk about often here. But I'm somewhat concerned that the two services are headed in different directions. My understanding is that the Marine Corps is making improvements aimed at making sure that Marines of all statures are equipped with appropriately fitted plates. While that's important, appropriately sized plates are but one component of a system aimed at making sure women have equipment designed specifically to improve protection and range of motion. The female improved outer tactical vest is an important example of how the Army is working to ensure that women have body armor with the appropriate form, fit, and function. So my concern is that the two services, while arguably trying to do what they think is right, are diverging in their approaches where there may be a great deal to be gained by a joint effort. So General Ostrowski and General Shrader, would you both talk about what you're doing in this area within your services and how it differs from the other service and why that's the case? So General Ostrowski.
Ma'am, thank you for the question. I will tell you that I think you're very well aware that the Army has not only sized body armor for our males, 11 different sizes, but also for our females, 11 separate sizes with respect to body armor. In addition to the 5 torso and 3 side plates in terms of different sizes that we've had in the past, we've added an additional 3 torso plates as well as an additional smaller side plate in order to address additional concerns with respect to our female soldiers. Our next generation soldier protection system, which will consist of about 121,000 systems for the folks, our soldiers that are on the leading edge in terms of engaging with and closing with the enemy in a close fight, will also include sizing for women. This is important based on where we've gone in terms of the Army and females' ability to serve within our infantry and armor forces. In addition, we will have 8 total sizes for the soldier protection system. This sizing is based on human factors design that we have done in conjunction with the Marine Corps. And the 8 sizes, again, fit not only our male soldiers, but are designed to fit our female soldiers based on the addition of the new plates, as well as the scalable torso protection system that we have.
We'll go to General Shrader now. I'll give you a quick time to respond. Maybe if you need more time, put it in the record later. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. So I think General Ostrowski said it exactly what we're doing too. We are working with the Army on our new plate carrier that we're getting ready to field. As far as the plates are concerned, we're buying the same plates as the Army. So yes, ma'am, we're working with the Army and moving forward.
Well, the Army has done some wonderful things. So not only the outer tactical vests, but they've better designed female protective undergarments, ballistic combat shirts, and I would encourage the Marines to take a look at that full suite of investments.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank the Marine Corps for inviting us to the parade a couple of weeks ago. I have not dried out yet, and I've got cases of immersion foot and jungle rot, which goes back 50 years ago to when I was in Vietnam. But anyway, a couple of systems which I'm really impressed on. The trophy system that you're looking at that. Thank God that you're taking a look at that with the development of the T-90 and everything like that. The Marine Corps, I know, is bringing on the new 81 Mike mortar. Not new, but the munitions. Can you just give me a quick heads up on that, what's going on that?
Congressman, we're looking at the ASERM round, which gives you, the extended range for the 81 millimeter mortar. That is in technical demonstration right now, but we're paying close attention to that.
Yeah, as that goes along, I'd be really interested in that. The other thing I wanted to address real quick, and everyone's aware of the RAND study. We're worried about long-range fires. The chairman talked about some of those things on that. We're concerned, at least I am, on HIMARS, whether we have enough ammunitions, the systems that, that unclassified portion of it, 60 hours to be in Tallinn and or Riga. If you could just briefly, anybody, how you looked at that, because I know it's got everyone's attention, and some of your systems addressing that, because I think that's an important part of the budget, the way it stands right now.
Yes, sir. So, Congressman, fire structure is part of the growth that we will experience in 18 with what we were granted in terms of the growth of the active component to 476. So we thank you, because it's just not the munitions, it's also the HIMARS and MLRS to shoot it, correct. And then we have a program going right now called Long Range Precision Fires. There's about $102 million in the base to take 2 prototypes into demonstration in 19. In addition to that, we are also SLEPing, Service Life Extension Program, on our ATACMS missile to make sure we've got the inventory And we're also working to double the range of the GMLRS missile as well.
Great. I'm rushing real quick. By the way, I was just out of Fort Irwin. They did a great cyber exercise. Some of these kids, I mean, they're right out of Star Wars. They're talking about some of the gear coming right off the shelf, and very, very impressive. The one thing that bothered me a little bit was the MICLIC, the mine going out with, this is 50 years ago, we were doing the same thing with the C4, the dead card that goes out there. Of course, I'm looking for something much quicker, and I'm wondering if there's anything in the works, and that's my last question. I yield back after that.
There is not. It's anything in the works to replace that currently, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony, and thank you all for your service to the country. General Ostrowski, the Army's budget request shows $37 million for a leader and follow ground robotics effort that would allow, in theory, unmanned cargo trucks to follow a single truck driven by a soldier. Elsewhere in the budget request is a larger $70.8 million effort that is spread across 7 different projects, including a squad multi-purpose transport, which appears to be a small cargo-carrying robot, and the common robotic system, which is a man-packable, less than 25-pound ground robot with various sensors, and a soldier-borne sensor, which is a very small handheld UAV. Could you please give us some details on these efforts and how they all fit together? And there's rapid progress in the commercial world on ground robotics. What year will the Army field its next generation of robots like the ones described in the research and development request? For example, when will the Army field a cargo or intelligence collection ground robot? And then finally, does the Army have any demonstrations planned to open up this area to commercial robot companies?
Sir, the Army has got a multifaceted approach to getting after ground robotics, and the Chief is leading the charge. He is all about ensuring, as we all are, that soldiers are not put into harm's way unnecessarily. The first of those efforts is the S&T effort that you talked about, leader-follower, which is in the S&T realm at the Army's Tartic location now. The intent is to create the capability for a leader vehicle, truck, that could be followed by other additional carrying capability that will go from port to a base. Again, not off-road, but along highways. This takes into account the ability for us to use commercial technologies that have been developed and to leverage those particular technologies. With respect to the SMIT that you talked about as well, the squad robotic capability, ability to move 1,000 pounds worth of equipment. Our ability to do that is based on our acquisition strategy of going through other transactional authority to get vendors to come in to provide papers on how we can get after that particular capability, take that down select to about 10, have them provide prototypes, and take those prototypes into test. Following the test, we'll down select about 4, and between the period of 19 to 20, we will then place those 4 standard types into the field for evaluations on behalf of our soldiers. That will lead to a decision by 2020 to make a call as to whether or not to field or not to field that particular capability.
Okay.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'm pleased to see that the Army's request to upgrade the Abrams tanks to the M1A2 SEP V3, and I understand the Army may attempt to accelerate additional upgrades for the SEP V4 configuration. That being said, the Abrams tank is now approaching 80 tons in gross vehicle weight. And what impact does this weight have, and are we getting the Mike 88s to make sure that we can tow those things, and also the things like the new jab bridge that we've been talking about since I was a young engineer lieutenant? Or, you know, can our bridges, our gap crossing capabilities support these new 80 tons instead of 70?
Yes, sir. So we got several problems. So you mentioned 2 of them would be the heavy equipment transport, or HETs. So right now we've got work going on in several different paths on the heavy equipment transport. So we've got a problem in Europe we've got to fix fairly quickly, which is one avenue of approach we're taking. And then we're also starting development what we're calling the super HET to account for the weight of the tank, which is actually combat loaded about 78 tons. So you're correct, approaching 80. With the bridges, we've got our engineers doing some work right now that it really comes down to the strength of the pins and the scissors is the weak point of that bridge. We can cross it right now, but only at caution crossing, which is basically walking speed. So we're working on the strength of the pins to try to save the bridges we've got and then increase the pins or increase the strength of the pins. And then you mentioned the Hercules. We also have an upgrade of the Hercules in works, RDT&E's funding in 18, and then actually going to development of allowing the Hercules to do a single vehicle recovery.
And I just ask that you pay real close attention to that, and we've got to have those upgrades in time to have them on the battlefield. And it's not just those force multipliers, but it's the things like our ISR capabilities. Are we up to range? It's the range on our artillery systems and our rocket systems as compared to our near peers. I mean, it's a total force, and you got to bring every force multiplier. So I ask both the Marine Corps and the Army to make sure that we get overmatched, because it's about rate of fire and standoff. And if you got those two things, you win. If you don't, you lose. So please focus on that. And then the other thing is for both of y'all on the aviation standpoint, I know the Army and especially the Army and the Marine Corps have our ITEP engines to make sure that we've got the increased capabilities for our rotor wing assets. Does that continue to be a top priority for both the Army and the Marine Corps?
It does, Congressman.
Congressman, for the Marine Corps perspective, not necessarily the ITEP, but modernization, particularly of our heavy lift capability, replacing the CH-53, which is rapidly reaching the end of its service life with the CH-53K.
And thank you, because that engine life and the lift power creates both, cost, but also life-saving and safety issues. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gallego.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We kind of hit on this earlier, but I'd like to go a little more in depth regarding standoff ground fire capability. It's an area where we may be deficient versus our competitors on the Russian side, especially when it comes to anti-armor capability. What are the Army and Marines doing to consider building the long-range ground fires capability? Please include any anti-armor or sensor fuse capability as part of that answer.
When you say long range, I assume you're talking the missile delivered fires?
Missile or artillery or...
Okay. So, Congressman, we're working LRPF, as I mentioned before, which the targeting about 499-kilometer range on that, which is current ATACMS 350, limited only to 499 because of the INF treaty, and we're working to double the payload, so 2 per pod as opposed to 1 per pod, which is an automatic way of doubling your force structure. We are working right now with 2 foreign governments on the potential of buying centrifuge munitions to put on both the GMLRS and the ATACMS, and we're working with Dr. Roper and the SCO really on some cannon-delivered munitions that would be an effective anti-armor capability.
Congressman, the way that we're getting after the long-range precision fire challenges, we're increasing capacity. We're with the growth to 185K, we're going to stand up an additional HIMARS battalion. In the FY18 request, we're continue to purchase additional munitions, and we work very closely on the innovations that the Army is proceeding with that General Murray just described.
In the meantime, what are the plans to retain or replace the capabilities affected by DoD's cluster munitions policy in Europe and other key operational environments around the world, or at least temporarily?
Congressman, the plan right now is to service life extend our ATACMS missiles from a cluster munition back to a unitary. We also have height of burst capability that we've also proven on that particular missile system and just recently tested to good effect. So that's the key thing there. With respect to the 155 rounds, our DPC ICMs, the intent there is to, again, use them if we can up until the point of time where we can't, and then those will be discarded, demilled. We are demilling 155s as we speak, as they've gone beyond their shelf life, but the others still remain in our inventory and are ready. Should the policy change, or should we need them prior to the deadline?
Lieutenant General.
We're continue to procure Gimler's alternative warhead to mitigate the challenge that General Ostrowski just described. But it's going to take a long time. We wouldn't get our full requirement until the mid-2020s.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all four of you being here. It's great to see my National War College classmate there, General Thomas. I was hoping you could give me your feedback on this perception. As I look out in our acquisition and our modernization, I think that we're going to produce future systems that have overmatch in the air domain, the sea domain. I think I feel like I could say the same thing in the space and cyber domains, but I worry about our land domain. When I look at the future weapon systems, I see that our near peers are producing stuff that are at parity or in some cases exceed when it comes to range, rate of fire, and so forth. So is my perception right? Should we be raising the bar on what we're going to produce for our soldiers and Marines on the ground domain? Love to get your feedback.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Congressman. And I'm, as I said the last time, I'm talking about a parity type of a guy because it does depend on how you look at the system. And the Army is absolutely trying to do that. And as I said last time, and I said in my opening statement, the last time and this time, is that we're now at the point where it's going to be hard to upgrade our current combat systems to retain that parity, and we have got to start looking at what comes next. The fundamental issue the Army has is when you look at our modernization, we have to prepare, we got to make sure soldiers tomorrow have the best equipment we can possibly provide them. And we've also got to start looking to the future. So you have two different efforts going on. You've got upgrading the current equipment, and you've got now, I think, some RDT&E started, next generation combat vehicles, specifically looking at future generation vehicle. You know, I can do RDT&E. The problem comes in procurement. I can't begin to buy a new vehicle until I finish upgrading the last vehicle. And when you got extended upgrade timelines, it becomes one ECP or one upgrade after another. So we've got to, you know, figure out how to shorten that timeline so I can free up the resources to go after the procurement of the next generation tank, air defense system, infantry fighting vehicle. I mean, there's lots of needs across the board.
Congressman, we would share the concerns that you articulated. The Marine Corps, a little bit different than the Army, we're a light general purpose force. So we look at, much as the Army does, we look at the entire system together, which is our overmatch comes by our ability to maneuver and the fires that we can bring to bear. That's cannon artillery, it's rockets, but it's also aviation. So that will continue to be a focus. I think much like the Army, we are focused on the individual Marine and soldier in terms of equipment, and my sense is that we're gaining momentum in that particular area. Our vehicles are, you know, just very old, and we've got good programs in place that meets our mission needs. The issue that we have is, the good news is we're getting hotlines now. The challenges that we face have to do with the speed at which we're modernizing that fleet. I'll just close my comments as I'm finished with my time here, is we want to seek overmatch for our ground domain, and if we don't have it, we're going to have to work hard. So I'd love to get your unfundeds and see how we can fight harder to give you that overmatch, because parity isn't good enough for our soldiers and Marines. Thank you.
Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here today. Lieutenant General Murray, in your written testimony, you stress the importance of prioritizing science and technology efforts and gaining understanding of state-of-the-art commercial and academic research in order to field the most modern capabilities to the force in the 2030s. I am aware that DoD and individual services have a number of research partnerships with academic institutions and commercial entities to share expertise and coordinate these efforts, research efforts. Academic institutions like UC Santa Barbara and California Polytechnic State University San Luis Obispo currently participate in Army and Air Force research partnerships through programs such as the University Affiliated Research Center and the Education Partnership Agreement Program. These programs have helped build partnerships between academic institutions, services, and industry experts in an effort to engage in advanced research, ultimately providing our personnel with the best technologies and capability. Lieutenant Generals Murray and Ostrowski, what resources can this committee further provide to help the Army take advantage of the research and technology being done in the commercial and academic sectors? And lastly, would expanding these research partnership programs with academic institutions and commercial sectors assist in identifying edge research and technology?
To answer your first part of your question, Congressman, is I think this committee and Congress as a whole have made it very clear to us how important S&T funding is, and that's why we have not, even in declining budgets, reduced our S&T funding. So right now, out of our modernization funds, the S&T budget is about 10% of that, which is a significant chunk of what I have for modernization. We recently just went through a process where we reshuffled some S&T funding away from near-term S&T back into basic research, which is really what you're talking about in terms of getting after requirements, you know, the reach for technology for the 2030s and beyond. And we have partnerships throughout this country. I can think of, I was just down in Arizona State. We have a partnership at Arizona State. We have partnerships all through North Carolina. The ones in California are obviously very, very important to us given the tech base out there. But I can't, and General Ostrowski may come up with something, but we understand the importance of the S&T funding for our future.
General Murray, I would agree completely, and I want to thank all members of Congress for the additional $800 million that was placed in the 17 budget with respect to the S&T portfolio. The use of academia as well as commercial marketplace is absolutely essential in getting after leading edge technologies that are filling the gaps that we are encountering on a daily basis. These are extremely important partnerships. There is no intent whatsoever to cut them off, and the ability to expand them is only a function of money.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
I want to thank our witnesses and our members for the fact that we've had an incredibly efficient sprint of a hearing. We're going to actually make the votes. We have Whitman and Rosen next, and we have Brown, I'm sorry. And how much time is left? It's 11:43 on the clock, so we have plenty of time. Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks for your service. Lieutenant General Davis, I want to go to you. For years, between sequestration and BCA, we've had our ability limited to really provide the necessary resources, I think, in all levels for our men and women in the United States Marine Corps. And I think this year's FY18 budget still falls well short of where we need to be to make up for lost ground from years past. And I want to go to a particular line in this year's budget that I'd like to get your perspective on. The line in this year's budget says this. It says, "This budget reflects hard choices that the Marines made to protect readiness, largely at the cost of modernization and infrastructure sustainment." I believe that budgets need to be driven by strategy, not vice versa. And I am deeply concerned about there being a bill payer for readiness, especially when we look at infrastructure sustainment, modernization. That's like eating our seed corn. To me, that's deeply troubling. Tell me this, if you were to be given additional resources this year, what would the priorities of the Marine Corps be to pipeline those resources to areas such as modernization and infrastructure sustainment?
Thank you, Congressman. You know, our priorities are the amphibious combat vehicle, joint light tactical vehicle, the Gator radar, and then aircraft such as the CH-53K and MV-22, and there are others. We, again, as I alluded to, we've got programs in place. You know, additional funding would be used to accelerate those programs. And to your point about sacrificing modernization for near-term readiness, that's something that's been a challenge for us over the past few years. We feel that this request improves on that somewhat. We've increased our ground modernization program by about 60%, up to $2.4 billion. Significant investment for us. But now it's just a matter about getting out of the old metal as soon as we possibly can.
Give me your perspective, too. You talked a little bit about ACV. This year's budget does put some additional dollars into ACV for test vehicles and then 26 low-rate production vehicles for ACV. Give me your perspective about how the Marine Corps came to 26 vehicles as the initial low-rate production number.
We've got, you know, we still, this coming year in 18 is where down select, you know, will occur. Mm-hmm. And so once that occurs, then, you know, we anticipate our request to increase. We're actually, the program's doing well. It's on a pretty tight timeline to make the IOC of 2020. Mm-hmm. So it's fully funded. Yeah. We need to do down select, and once we've done that, We can't really accelerate IOC any earlier, but we can accelerate FOC, which would be funds starting next year.
Time's expired. Mr.
Thank you,
Brown?
Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both of my questions go to the Army. I'll ask both of them. You can answer it and allocate the time accordingly. One, regarding the Mobile Protected Firepower Vehicle Program. And the question is, you've got the Bradley Fighting Vehicle. Why are we going to the Mobile Protected Firepower Program? Is it mobility, lethality, survivability? Next question is on the CH-47. Army has a requirement for 14 more of those between the CH-47 and the MH-47 variant for SOCOM. You're only asking for 6, so that's 14. It's a few less than your requirement. What's the impact on the mission, and do you anticipate an impact on your vendor in terms of their ability to keep pace with what you'll eventually need? Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. On the MPF, so it's a completely different role than the Bradley plays. So it is, MPF is in fact a light tank, and we're targeting lethality between a 105 and a 120 millimeter cannon, and it's really not to go up against other tanks, but it's to maintain momentum of our light forces that we begin to field other vehicles to our infantry brigade combat teams. So it's not an infantry carrier. It is, in fact, a light tank that is, in fact, about the same weight as a Bradley, but it carries a much bigger punch and a little bit more frontal armor protection. And in the CH-47, I'll turn that over to General Ostrowski.
Yes, sir. The multi-year that we had with the Chinook ends in 17, and we are indeed 14 short of our authorized amount within the Army. The intent going forward is to move to the Block 2, CH-47F Block 2, which provides greater capability over the current Block 1. However, when we do that particular venue, we know that we're going to be short in terms of the number of aircraft that we're able to buy each year. For instance, in 18, you said yourself, sir, about 6 aircraft. Two of these are the 47F Block 1s, and 2 of these are the variant for SOCOM. That does not get better through 20 to 22, not until 23 do we get back up to the point where we're producing the amount of aircraft from that facility that we have been in the past. So it is concerning. Again, it's a combination of a transition to a new platform in terms of the capability. Again, same platform, greater capability. The combination of doing that and the money that we have to invest in that particular upgrade to the current platform that's putting us in this position. We are constantly working with the vendor as well as partner nations in FMS sales. This particular year in 17, the reason that we were able to execute the multi-year was because we had help from another country that brought us up to the level to get to the multi-year amount. So we will continue to push hard for that because, again, we are running out of the ability to help that vendor just by our own buys alone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time has expired. Gentlemen, we are looking forward to the unfunded requirements lists that are coming out, and I would ask, as a continuing obligation for this hearing, if when they are available, if you would each provide to us your written perspectives on those as we might be able to evaluate them as we go forward. So assume it as a question that has been asked you here to get your thoughts and input concerning the unfunded list and the unfunded requirements list, and we'll look forward to that if you could provide us that as soon as possible as those might become available. Thank you.